Hey, this is Jon Tsourakis, president of Youre. If you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Jons.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Jons.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. Perhaps the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world. Hey listeners, welcome to today's episode. Great to have you here with us. We have a wonderful guest with us today. His name is Jon Tsourakis, and he is a serial entrepreneur, seasoned leader, and strategist. As a sales and marketing expert, he is constantly studying brand identity, business communications, buyer behavior, sales conversions, marketing systems, product, service, design, and all things digital. He has created 2 companies that have averaged 4x return on investment for businesses with branding and marketing models. In 2019, he merged his agency and became co-owner of Youre. I'm going to get him to tell us the name very soon as president and chief revenue officer, where he is responsible for the sales and growth of the company. Jon, a big warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Pleasure to be here, man.
Cool. What's the name of the actual organization that you're co-owner of?
Youre.
So, yeah, okay, good. That's good. Very good. And what do they do?
We're a digital marketing agency and web and software development company. So, yeah, help companies grow, scale, and then build systems to affect top line and bottom line revenue through efficiencies.
Oh, awesome. Now, one thing I always ask my guests is, whereabouts in the world are you today?
I'm in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida.
Oh, very cool. Oh, nice. Is it sunny?
Actually, it is. Yeah, it rained a little bit this morning, but I went out for lunch, and yeah, it was quite sunny.
Yeah, good. Yeah, because we're coming out of summer here in this part of the world, and then you're, of course, into spring, and then things are changing. But, you know, most parts of the world, they're in spring, but it's still snowing, or the snow's just starting. It's like, what the heck's going on here? A little bit confusing for a lot of people. Hey, so we've given a little bit of a background to the listeners about you. Is there anything else you want to share about your background?
No, I guess, yeah. I mean, I grew up, a home builder and carpenter's son. So the way that I look at things is through like building a really strong foundation and, all the pillars for integrity. So it's, being on a construction site from the age of like 6 years old until like 18 or 19, that's a lens that I think is, it served me a lot of value throughout my life.
Yep. And, being a leader in today, building a foundation, how is important? What do you think? Is it important for a leader to build a foundation as a leader for them to be effective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to let everybody know where they're at and where you're at. So that's what I think is a really good foundation. And I call it getting in rhythm with people or whatnot. But limbo as a contest is designed to be uncomfortable. And when people feel that they're in limbo, you're letting people suffer around you.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to just have a rock solid foundation through trust and being genuine with those around you, so they understand, all right, who you are, what you're doing, and there's a level, setting of expectation, so they know where they're at with you.
Yeah, cool. A little bird has told me that you're not conventional. Is that correct?
No, I would not say that I'm very conventional. No.
Yeah, there's always a better way.
There always is a better way. Yeah. And I got that. I remember I was very challenging when I was a child, and people would say, this is the way that we would do it. Or you're always trying to find the easy way. And then you would shame yourself, and then you get older and you're like, well, yeah, that was the right way to do it. Yeah. I've been, you're fighting it all along, right? Just your instincts. Yep. So there's always a better way. And I think all successful companies, the greatest companies, have a board, right? So I think that type of dialogue with your company, whether you can have a board or not, or mentors or coaches, is really important, because you can remove the emotion from a situation and get that other perspective, because you're typically too close to it. So I always challenge the people that I work with in my teams, like, okay, is there a better way that we can be doing this? Okay. If not, all right, let's just continue doing what we're doing.
And I think it's really important, that we are, as leaders, thinking about that, and if we can do it a better way. There are dangerous words out there I keep talking about all the time. That is, but we've always done it this way. And I'm like, yeah, that's dangerous. Come on, let's think a little bit differently. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Jon, how did you get into leadership?
And I think, well, so the quick story is I worked for my father, and he fired me in front of a group of people. I was going to college with this guy at the time. He gave me a job, and I was thrown to the wolves to head up a lot of their sales and their marketing at a really young age. And it was sink or swim. So at that point, just had to move forward and do the best I could. And I think a lot of it came organically through trial and error. But then along the way, it's something I really began to study, looking at courses and, of course, reading books, and then emulating specific people and saying, okay, this is what's working for them. That's what I want to go ahead and take my buffet, and not even so much even putting the words leadership on it, but just how can I guide these people, get what I want, and in return give them what they want. And at the end of the day, will they follow me? And that's essentially kind of the beginning of it.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to look at it. If you could look at what others are doing really well and sort of to adopt some of that. But then also I think the other side is what they're not doing well, or you see a leader that's not that great and you go, okay, that's the kind of person I don't want to be like. So that's that's quite good too, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Just some leaders, I had an old boss, and the guy was like wildly unorganized and just like would never show up on time, and he would be late for things, and that just irritated me to the core. And it's something that I try to endeavor to do: always be on time, communicate when you're not going to be on time, and make sure you always show up. You have people that are habitual plan cancelers. To me, that is one of the worst traits and the worst signs. It's just, you have no decisiveness, and it's just a really bad signal to those around.
Yeah, it also shows me that you don't actually have really very good discipline.
That too. Yeah, great point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, here's a question for you. Now, this person could be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
I say that my favorite leader that's alive right now would be Toto Wolff, the chief or general manager of the Mercedes Formula One team. That guy is just super impressive. Yeah, just incredible what he's been able to do. And then, there's so many that have passed on, and I don't even know if they were even like really great leaders, some of them, but just, people that you try to just emulate. As far as like a communication person, I was always amazed by how prodigious Ben Franklin was. So that's probably, if I had to look at a dead leader, somebody that I would try to emulate.
Obviously, you haven't met Ben Franklin. Also, have you met the Mercedes Formula One guy?
No, I have not. No, that guy is incredible.
If you were to meet one of them and be on a park bench somewhere having a coffee with them, what would be one question you would ask them?
I think what motivates them, right? So just based on how much they're trying to achieve, and then I think the other is what is their relationship with control. Because I've noticed the most successful people, there's this ability to let go of control and just really trust the team around them to get these things done. And to me, that is just, it's amazing. Not that I'm a control freak or anything, but our anxieties go up the further we are from an outcome if we genuinely care. So that's something that I believe they have, they're a bit stronger at that. Or quite stronger at that than I am. So in other words, they've got control of themselves to be able to handle control. Right. Yeah. So the further you are from the end delivery of something, you're trusting all these systems and processes and people to not be complacent and get that done at equal the standard that you set or higher. And between my companies, there's roughly like 60 people. So it's not that much. And some of these others, just the racing team, I believe there's, a few hundred people, which is amazing, winning, I think it's like 8 championships now, which I find remarkable. Or even take, a company like Apple. I mean, I would have probably said Steve Jobs is my hero until I read the biography on him, and I was like, wow, I don't want to be anything like that guy. That to me is just remarkable how you just build this thing with a really solid foundation. Granted, some of my words, but you continually go up, and you're just so far away from what's actually being built and delivered.
Yeah, and I think the big thing here that I'm hearing what you say, it's around processes, systems, things like that. Because any high performing team, high performing organization, high performing individual, whether they're an athlete or corporate world entrepreneur, always comes down. There's this one trait that I keep saying. Well, there's a few traits. One is, of course, attitude and so forth. But one trait that I see outside of resilience or grit, it comes down to processes and systems they have in place, because they can do rinse and repeat, but they know what works. They know what's really good, but they're more efficient than other people. And I see that trait everywhere coming through from around processes and systems. Is that something that even a leader who runs a small team or a leader that runs a larger team, because a lot of them are going, well, I'm a leader, I'm not an entrepreneur, I don't own the business and all things like that. Do you think that they should actually still have processes and systems for them around their leadership and the way that they run teams and things like that?
For sure. And there's always a process, whether you know there's a process or not. There's a process taking place. So it behooves you to define that process and optimize it to the best of your abilities, especially if you want to be better. And if you're not waking up to be better than you were the day before, I don't know what to tell you, right? You're probably not listening to this podcast. So I think that is inherently important for everybody. And I think some cultures embrace that more than others. And I would say that those are just more successful individuals. I mean, even take parenting, right? The parents that are teaching your kid, all right, clean your room, make your bed, do those things. So these little processes, these little habits that are going to serve you better in life. So yeah, I agree. Leaders should be looking at whether it's them calendaring, which I think is a leadership skill, when somebody's not making sure that they block off their time effectively or giving someone their undivided attention, or even the way that they go about their work. I think those are inherent things that every leader should do, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Now, the show's called Leadership is Changing. When I say that title of the show or that statement, what does that mean for you?
I mean, in its most simple terms, that leadership is changing.
Yep.
I mean, I could try to change the words around, but and I think it's just maybe the evolution, right? So the evolution of leadership. Yeah, I don't know how much more I can add to that, Dennis.
Yeah, no, just that some people think, oh, is it? No, it's not, and then others are saying, yeah, it needs to. And so it's quite interesting just to get different, people that I interview, their perspective on it and where they see things going around leadership and that whether it is changing or not. And yeah, I
agree. It is. Yeah. And I think so. If I was just to look at just even in the last 30 something years since I've been alive or cognizant of what's going on, there was more authoritarian leadership, right? So there was more somebody talking at you and you had to do this thing. And if you didn't do this thing, you were going to be shamed, and you don't want that scenario, right? Or punished in some other way or some form. I believe what's changing now, and I think it's for the better, is it's more it's more genuine being with somebody saying, hey, we're going to align what it is that you want with what it is that I want, and it's going to be mutual based on these outcomes. It doesn't necessarily have to be entirely equitable, but it's going to be substantially closer than it was before. So I think there's more of, I dare use the word like shared vulnerability, but I think there's just more of a connection between, the person that's leading and the person that is following than it was before.
There you go. You see? You knew.
Didn't understand the question. Forgive me. I was educated in Florida.
Oh, so. What does that mean? There it is. I mean, those in the US who are listening to this, they'll understand that. They'll probably go, oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah, it's all good. Hey, you and I are living in a very fast-paced, changing world, whether it be data, social, technology, business. It's just getting faster and faster all the time. What do you reckon makes a leader successful in today's fast-paced, ever-changing world?
Understanding that information is volume. So not to be emotionally triggered by everything that's around them, and also being selective, right? Whether it's what they consume, whether they consume based on media or whether they consume insofar as, whether it's drinking or eating. And what I mean by that is there's so much going on that you have to prioritize and select what it is that not only that you're going to do, but what you're also going to accept for information. You hear stories about people that are just nailed with a ton of lawsuits at some time, whether it's something they did or that they didn't do, and their ability to just get through those types of situations. So that's where, looking at information like volume and compartmentalizing based, knowing what to turn down and turn up so you can actually get the things done that you need to get done.
Yeah, we tend to see a lot of people sort of believing what they are reading or seeing all the time and probably not being selective. And how's that having an effect in your part of the world with people today? How's it affecting them?
Oh, it's entirely emotional. I mean, it's to think that another foreign power could not come in and just put something on our airwaves to dictate the way that people think would be super naive to just control a populace. So I think, leaders need to be really, you are what you eat. That saying is you are what it is that you see and you hear. So you just have to be really selective on what it is that you're consuming. And it's not being deaf. It's just being a leader, right? Just doing the best you can for those around you and filtering. Because if you're not, all you're doing yourself is a disservice, right? Somebody that's struggling with depression, should they be drinking all the time? No, because alcohol is a depressant. I mean, come on. It's just these basic common sense type of things. If you want to lose weight, eat healthy. Try to move as much as possible. If you want to be in a better mood, how about you listen to happier music? How about you watch happier shows? How about you stop consuming as much media? There's these really basic fundamental things that I think leaders or just people can do a better job at as being a leader, right? Because if you show up with enthusiasm and your attitude and you're able to just energize those that are around you, what can be accomplished and get done can far surpass somebody that's not paying attention to those things.
Yeah, amazing. And I think the energy, I always talk about it, John, whereby I say to people, nobody wants to work for a knuckle dragger. And what do I mean by that? Somebody's shoulders are drooped, they're hanging there, and they're just walking around and everything's negative and they're just dragging their knuckles along the ground. People want to work for somebody with energy. They want with a great attitude. No one wants to work for somebody who's not winning. And I don't mean you have to be out there winning everything, but you have to have a great attitude. And if you're going to lead people, then do that. If you don't want to do that and you haven't got a great attitude, like John said, maybe not get up in the morning, stay in bed and keep sleeping. I don't know. It's just a little bit different to the way we are. And I think the energy is so important for people.
I completely agree.
Yeah. And the other thing I see as well, John, is based on what you're just saying there, is that a lot of leaders, very good leaders, shelter people from things. In other words, I'm not saying they keep things away from them. They're still being transparent, but there is so much noise out there that they go, there are certain things that we need to focus on. And the really good leaders will get people to focus on those things and try and keep the noise out of what's going on. However, I think there are some leaders who try and keep things too controlled. And that's where people start to get upset. And that's looking at a good segue into my next question here, which is, you and I have been talking about leaders through the lens of a leader. Let's flip that around now and start talking about employees, because I'm sure you've got employees. I've been an employee. You've been an employee. You were an employee. You got sacked by your father. All that kind of stuff's happened over the past, right? We've all had those kind of experiences. Employees' expectations of leaders, how's that changed of late?
I think they demand honesty more than ever. They are not going to accept anything less than is like complete authenticity. People are sick and tired of the BS stories. They're not in the mood of being strung along in any way. They demand. I think they demand more from their leaders, more example setting, right? And you can't really hide as much as I think you could anymore, because there's just try. I guess the harder thing on people and leaders today, and maybe even so much employees, is before you could really go and reinvent yourself. You could, make a muck up in some other town and then drive, 100 miles away. It's like, all right, it's a whole new you. Now there's more pressure. You got to do the best that you can. I'm saying you can't fail, but you have to be really true to your character and values. Organically, unfortunately, through life, there's people that are going to be upset and take perspectives where you're going to just naturally make, enemies based on them seeing something wrong and not wanting to share with you. So I think it's up to leaders to do the best that they can to lead with their best foot forward, lead with their values, lead with character. So I think that's what employees are looking at. They expect substantially more. And on the flip side, it's deserved because they're humans, right? So some people would try to argue and say that that's entitlement, but I say, hey, those people are trusting you and they're giving their time to work for you. So you owe it to them to be the best that you can be for them.
And are you seeing in your part of the world whereby leaders who are not doing that, a lot of employees starting to walk?
I think they're starting to walk. You'll see people kind of vacillate based on something, whether it's politically or whatnot. And I think at the end of the day, they could be out of touch, right? Some of these companies get so big and they're so unplugged with the person that's at the little, or even just take the president, right? We have somebody that hasn't even driven themselves around for, a number of years making, policies and whatnot that affect the everyday person. It's like, well, wait a second. It's almost like royalty. They're so far removed from that situation. And I think a lot of that happens with companies. And I think at the end of the day, the employees let them know where they stand. Like, yeah, we're not friends. We wouldn't go to the same barbecue, right? We wouldn't play at the same golf course. And I think that classism begins to take effect. Now, if the values are pure and true and the person has a model that they can scale up and potentially get to that position, I think those companies are in a healthier position.
I see a lot of those kind of situations where then there's this arrogance comes into it as well, and the unrelatable side of things where people just can't relate to that person. Yet again, that leader can't relate to people either,
right.
To that kind of person as well. When you say unplugged, and also when you're talking about that classism, do you reckon that a lot of these leaders just go and do it on purpose, or are they sort of it just happens over time?
I think it happens over time. It's organic. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, people like the sense of community. They want to be able to connect with others. And sure, we've been to places and saying like, okay, I don't fit in there. That doesn't feel uncomfortable. But I'd say on the majority, most of people that manage or run companies don't grow that company to create distance between themselves and the people they work with. I think it just happens. They, whether you're an entrepreneur and you started your own company or you just manage others, you're going to learn these different skill sets, and the other person, if they're specialists and they're, whether it's on the factory floor or they're the designer or the programmer, you just begin, surrounding yourself with different people in a lot of cases. And I think you just go on different pathways. And before you know it, if you're not really good at connecting with others, now you really don't have as much in common with them as you did, other than, of course, representing the same company. But I say that if you have the same values at the end of the day and you're aligned with those, there's always a foundation.
Yeah. I actually I laugh when I say laugh. I mean, it's serious stuff, but I laugh because in the sense that I listen to people at times and they have a new leader come on board and you can see that there's no rapport or they don't like the way that the person works. And they say this comment, which is from an employee's expectation, it's okay. They'll only be here for 18 months. And then another leader will come on board, right? But for the team, they're the constant team. They're always the same team, but they just see people coming in and out as leaders. And it's really interesting to see that whole dynamic happen, which is not always good, but hey, it's interesting. Now, I understand that you're very good at organizing. You have that ability to organize chaos and help people through that. If we get your crystal ball out here and help us understand about the future, because a lot of it is chaotic for a lot of us right now. Yeah. Where do you see leadership being in 5 years?
I think it being I think it's going to come down to just brutal transparency. And I think it's just going to take on a more genuineness where people are just removing the publicist as much as possible and trying to connect with their teams internally. But on the flip side of that, I think externally people are going to be a little bit more hushed because unfortunately, I don't think the canceling is going anywhere. So I think right now what we're going through is a bit of a shakeup of people figuring out what their voice is and what they should say and what they shouldn't say. But I think maybe at the end of the line that's just going to create more truth, right? And people are going to understand, where their leaders stand for the companies that they represent.
And do you feel like the leaders are actually saying enough, or they need to say more, and so then we understand what their opinion is and whether they do have one or not around certain topics?
I'm conflicted on that. One side says that, you should take a stand and this is what you believe in. But at the end of the day, is it just we're going back to the two things you shouldn't talk about with strangers is the politics and religion, right? So it's hard to say. I like being real with somebody and just saying, hey, this is what I am and this is what I believe in. But I think we have something working against us, which is the internet, and somebody's going to capture that snippet, and that person's position on that topic is going to change because they're a logical, smart person, and it's going to be used against them in the future. So I think until we figure out that dynamic, we're always going to struggle with accepting what people say right now and not holding that against them into the future.
Yeah, it's interesting how people are afraid to say things because they think it's going to be held against them or people will go against them and that. And so nothing worse than a leader who doesn't say anything, and nothing worse than a leader who doesn't make a decision. And but again, be smart about it and also be strategic. And if you're actually connected with people and you understand where things are going, then what you're saying is going to be in line with what's going on, and you're not going to go say something that's totally opposite. And I'm not saying that you can't be totally opposite, but I'm saying be mindful of what's going on. I think it's having that emotional intelligence to understand what's happening.
Absolutely. You got it right there. Being connected with people. I think that's the most thing. When you're like disconnected and you're out of rhythm, you're going to say stupid things. You're going to piss everybody off. But when you're a part of that collective and you're speaking for your people, I think that's the most harmonious approach.
Yeah, cool. Hey, Jon, thank you for joining us on today's show. If our listeners are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
Dennis, no, thanks. You and I have similar last names. There's not probably a whole lot of us that have our names, but my name is Jon Tsourakis. So look me up on LinkedIn, Jon, last name T as in Thomas as in Sam, Ourakis. And I'd love to connect with you. I love talks like this or, answering any questions to help somebody on their journey.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you for joining us. We're going to put that details into the show notes, but it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today. So thank you.
Dennis, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Great questions.
Hey, listeners, be connected with your people and listen to what they're saying. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Look out for the episodes as they're being released. Download them, have a listen, put a review and a rating. Feel free to share them with your friends, your family, and your network. Hey, if there's any feedback you'd like to give me about the show, or if there's a question you have for the Ask Dennis Freestyle episode, then send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Hey, listeners, it's always a pleasure being with you. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.